The storm came without warning that October night in 1875, just like death itself. Lightning split the Texas sky like the crack of a whip, illuminating the small homestead where Eleanor Blackwood knelt beside her dying grandmother. The old Cherokee woman's weathered hands, once strong enough to weave baskets and deliver babies, now trembled as she pressed a worn leather pouch into Eleanor's palm. "Run, child," the old woman whispered, her voice barely audible above the thunder. "They're coming for what's hidden, the sacred map, our people's legacy. Don't let them have it." Eleanor's tears mixed with the rain that leaked through the cabin's roof. At 20 years old, she'd never known life without her grandmother's guidance. After her parents died of fever when she was 7, the old woman had raised her, teaching her the ways of both worlds, the Cherokee traditions of her mother's people, and the harsh realities of frontier life. "I won't leave you, grandmother," Eleanor sobbed, clutching the frail hand. But the old woman's eyes, still sharp despite her fading strength, suddenly widened with terror. Through the storm's chaos came another sound, hoofbeats. Many hoofbeats. "The Branson gang," her grandmother gasped. "They know about the map. Go through the root cellar, follow the creek, find the railroad camp. Samuel Hawthorne, he'll help you. His soul carries old wounds but a good heart. Now go." The door exploded inward before Eleanor could respond. 3 men burst in rain-soaked and wild-eyed guns drawn. The leader, a scarred man with dead eyes, pointed his revolver at Eleanor. "Where is it, old woman?" he snarled. "The Cherokee treasure map. We know you have it." Eleanor's grandmother struggled to sit up defiant, even in her final moments. "You'll never find it. It belongs to my people, not to thieves and murderers." The gunshot was deafening in the small space. Eleanor screamed as her grandmother fell back, a dark stain spreading across her chest. The old woman's lips moved one last time. "Run!" Rage and grief exploded through Eleanor's body. She grabbed the hot coffee pot from the stove and hurled it at the nearest outlaw, the scalding liquid causing him to howl and drop his gun. In the confusion, she dove through the trap door to the root cellar, the leather pouch clutched against her chest. "Get her!" the leader roared. "She has the map." Eleanor burst from the cellar's outside entrance into the storm. Rain lashed her face, turning the ground to mud that sucked at her bare feet. She'd lost her boots in the escape, but there was no time to care. Behind her, she heard the men ransacking the cabin, then the ominous whoosh of flames. They were burning her home, destroying everything she'd ever known. She ran blindly through the darkness, guided only by intermittent lightning flashes. The creek her grandmother mentioned had to be near. Tree branches tore at her dress and hair, leaving bloody scratches on her arms and face. The storm was both blessing and curse. It hid her trail, but also disoriented her completely. There, a shout behind her. "I see her!" Gunfire cracked through the night. Eleanor felt a bullet whistle past her ear. She stumbled, fell, scrambled up again. Her feet were bleeding now, cut by rocks and thorns, but adrenaline drove her forward. The creek appeared suddenly swollen with rainwater rushing fast and dangerous. Without hesitation, she plunged in. The current immediately seized her, spinning her around, pulling her under. She fought to keep her head above water, to keep hold of the precious pouch. The cold was shocking, stealing her breath, but it also carried her away from her pursuers, faster than she could have run. She didn't know how long she was in the water. Time became meaningless. There was only survival, only the next breath, the next second of staying alive. When she finally managed to grab an overhanging root and pull herself onto the bank, she was miles from home, shivering violently, but alive. But they would keep coming. Men like that didn't give up, not when treasure was involved. Her grandmother's stories echoed in her mind. The map led to a cache of gold hidden by her ancestors when they were forced from their lands, meant to help their descendants reclaim what was stolen. Many had died protecting its secret. Now that burden fell to Eleanor. She forced herself to stand, to keep moving, despite every muscle screaming in protest. Through the thinning trees, she saw lights in the distance. Lanterns, many of them. The railroad camp. But between her and safety stretched open ground, and dawn was beginning to break. Soon she'd be visible, an easy target. That's when she heard it. A different sound of hoofbeats. A single rider coming from the direction of the camp. Friend or foe? Eleanor pressed herself against a tree hand, closing around a sharp stone, her only weapon. The rider appeared through the morning mist. A tall man on a black horse, moving with purpose but not threat. He wore the practical clothes of a working man, not the flashy garb of an outlaw. As he drew closer, Eleanor saw his face, weathered but not old, maybe late 20s, with eyes that held their own shadows. He suddenly reined in his horse head, turning as if sensing something. His gaze swept the tree line and found her. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the distance. Then Eleanor heard the other horses approaching. Her pursuers had found her trail. The man seemed to understand immediately. Without a word, he spurred his horse toward her, extending his hand as he thundered past. It was a moment of pure instinctive trust given to a stranger because there was no other choice. Eleanor grabbed his hand, felt herself lifted with surprising strength onto the horse behind him. "Hold on," he said, his voice rough but steady. "Whatever you're running from, it won't catch you now." As they raced toward the railroad camp, Eleanor pressed her face against the stranger's back, feeling the solid warmth of another human being for the first time since her grandmother's death. She didn't know who this man was or why he'd helped her, but in that moment, he was hope itself, carrying her away from death toward whatever fate awaited in the vast Texas frontier. Samuel Hawthorne hadn't expected to find a woman in his arms that morning, especially not one who looked like she'd fought death itself, and barely won. As his horse Thunder carried them through the gates of the railroad camp, he felt her grip loosen her body, going limp against his back. She'd held on just long enough to reach safety. "Doc Margaret," Sam called out as he reined in near the medical tent. "Got someone who needs help." The camp was already stirring to life. Railroad workers emerged from their tents and shanties, drawn by the commotion. Sam dismounted carefully, catching Eleanor as she slid sideways, unconscious but breathing. Up close, he could see the full extent of her condition. Bare feet, torn and bloody dress ripped to shreds, scratches covering her arms and face. Whatever she'd been through, it had been hell. Doc Margaret pushed through the gathering crowd, her graying hair pinned back severely, her sharp eyes taking in the situation immediately. "Bring her inside," she ordered. Despite being widowed 2 years ago when her husband died in a construction accident, Margaret had stayed on as the camp's only medical practitioner. She was tough as leather and twice as valuable. Sam carried Eleanor into the medical tent, laying her gently on the cot. As he stepped back, something fell from her hand. A leather pouch, old and worn, clearly precious to her given how tightly she'd been holding it, even unconscious. He picked it up, intending to set it aside safely, when he noticed the Cherokee beadwork on it. His jaw tightened. He knew that pattern. He'd seen it before during the war when Cherokee scouts had helped his unit navigate Indian territory. "What happened to her?" Margaret asked, already cleaning Eleanor's wounds. "Don't know exactly. Found her at the edge of camp, being chased. 3 riders, maybe more. They looked like trouble." Margaret's hands paused. "The Branson gang." "Could be. They've been hitting homesteads north of here." Sam's voice hardened. "Burning them out, looking for something." The camp foreman, Patrick O'Sullivan, entered the tent. A big Irishman with arms like tree trunks and a heart to match. He'd been running railroad camps for 15 years. "Sam, the sentry's report riders circling the perimeter. They're not approaching, just watching." "They want her," Sam said simply. "Or what she's carrying." Patrick's bushy eyebrows rose. "And we're involved because she asked for my help." Sam replied, though that wasn't entirely true. She hadn't asked. She'd simply trusted, and somehow that felt more binding than words. "And because we don't hand people over to the Branson gang." Patrick studied him for a moment. Sam Hawthorne was known as a man who kept to himself, worked hard, and minded his own business. Since arriving at the camp 2 years ago, he'd never asked for anything beyond his pay and a place to set his bedroll. For him to take a stand now meant something. Right then, Patrick said, "I'll double the watch and send word to the sheriff in Amarillo, though God knows when he'll get here." Eleanor stirred on the cot, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, panic flashed across her face as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. Then her gaze found Sam, and she seemed to remember. "You saved me," she whispered. "You saved yourself," Sam corrected. "I just provided the horse." She tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. "My grandmother, they killed her, burned our home." Tears began to flow, but there was steel beneath the grief. "They want the map." "What map?" Margaret asked, gently helping her sit up and offering water. Eleanor hesitated, then seemed to decide these people had earned some truth. "My grandmother was Cherokee. Before her people were forced west, they hid gold meant to buy land to start over when it was safe. The location was passed down through the women of our family. My grandmother was the last who knew. Now it's just me." Sam handed her the leather pouch. "This was in your hand." She clutched it to her chest. "Thank you. I'm Eleanor. Eleanor Blackwood." "Sam Hawthorne. This is Doc Margaret, and Patrick O'Sullivan runs this camp." Patrick stepped forward. "Miss Blackwood, you're welcome here as long as you need. We don't bow to outlaws, and we protect our own." "I'm not your own," Eleanor said quietly. "I'm nobody. Half Cherokee, half white, belonging nowhere." "That's where you're wrong, lass," Patrick said firmly. "Everyone working towards something better belongs here. The railroad doesn't care about your blood, only your character." Outside, a commotion arose. Sam went to the tent flap and saw riders approaching under a white flag, 2 of them leaving their guns visibly holstered. The scarred leader from Eleanor's description wasn't among them. "They want to talk," Sam said. Eleanor tried to stand, but Margaret held her back. "You're in no condition." "I need to face them," Eleanor insisted. "Running only works for so long." Sam looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Despite everything she'd been through, there was a dignity to her, a strength that went beyond physical courage. She reminded him of another woman, one he'd failed to protect. But that was a different time, a different place. This was here and now, and he could make different choices. "You don't face them alone," he said. "Patrick might. I borrow a gun." Patrick grinned. "Now you're talking sense, boy." He handed Sam a Colt .45. "Though I hope you remember how to use it." Sam checked the cylinder with practiced ease. "Some things you don't forget." They walked out together, Sam, Eleanor leaning on Margaret for support, and Patrick with several armed workers flanking them. The 2 outlaws sat their horses at a respectful distance, hands visible. "We've got no quarrel with the railroad," one called out. "We just want what the girls stole." "I stole nothing," Eleanor called back, her voice stronger than her body. "What my grandmother left me is mine by right." "That gold belongs to whoever's strong enough to take it," the outlaw replied. "That's the law out here." "No," Sam said, stepping forward. "That's what men like you tell themselves to justify being thieves and murderers. The law is what civilized people agree to live by. And in this camp, the law says she's under our protection." The outlaws exchanged glances. "You're making a mistake, friend. Cole Branson doesn't forget. Neither does the man paying him." "Then he'll have to remember us all," Patrick boomed. "Every man here stands with her. Tell Branson if he wants a war with the railroad, he's welcome to it. But I guarantee he won't like how it ends." The outlaws wheeled their horses around without another word, galloping back toward the horizon. But everyone knew they'd be back. As the crowd dispersed, Eleanor touched Sam's arm. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me." Sam was quiet for a moment, watching the dust settle where the riders had been. "During the war, I rode with a unit that got separated from the main force. Cherokee scouts found us, fed us, guided us to safety. They didn't know us either, but they helped because it was right. Your grandmother would have been about the age of the woman who led those scouts. Maybe it's time I return the favor." Eleanor studied his face. "That's not the only reason." "No," Sam admitted. "It's not." He turned to walk away, then paused. "Get some rest, Miss Blackwood. Tomorrow I'll teach you to shoot. If they come back, you'll be ready." As he walked toward the smithy where he worked, Eleanor called after him. "It's Eleanor, just Eleanor." He looked back, and for the first time in 2 years, Patrick saw him really smile. Then it's Sam, just Sam. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the railroad camp that had become an unlikely sanctuary. Around them, the work of building America's future continued. Hammers ringing on steel men shouting orders, the great locomotive breathing steam like a slumbering dragon. But for Eleanor and Sam, though they didn't know it yet, their own future was beginning to take shape, forged in violence, but tempered by something altogether different. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her grandmother's face, heard the gunshots, smelled the smoke of her burning home. Doc Margaret had given her a small dose of laudanum for the pain, but she refused more, fearing the nightmares that might come with deeper sleep. She rose quietly from her cot in the medical tent and stepped outside. The camp was quiet except for the sentries walking their rounds and the distant sound of horses in the corral. The moon was full, casting everything in silver light that made the world seem both beautiful and haunted. She found Sam sitting alone by a small fire near the smithy, a bottle beside him that he wasn't drinking from, just staring at. He looked up when he heard her approach. "Shouldn't you be resting?" he asked. "Shouldn't you be sleeping?" she countered, wrapping the blanket Margaret had given her tighter around her shoulders. He gestured to the spot beside him. "Fire's warm if you're cold." Eleanor sat down carefully, her body still protesting every movement. For a while, they just sat in silence, watching the flames dance. "You want to know why I really helped you," Sam said suddenly. It wasn't a question. Eleanor waited, sensing this was something he needed to say more than she needed to hear. 2 years ago, I had a wife, Sarah, and a daughter, Emma. She was 3 years old, had her mother's smile, and my stubborn streak. His voice was steady but distant, like he was reciting facts about strangers. "We had a small farm in Missouri. I'd come back from the war, thought I was done with violence. Thought I could just raise crops and children grow old watching sunsets." He picked up a stick and poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward. "There was a dispute with a neighbor about water rights. Nothing that should have led to bloodshed. But the neighbor hired men to intimidate us. I was in town when they came. Sarah tried to protect Emma. Tried to." He stopped his jaw working. "The house was already burning when I got back. I could hear Emma crying, but the smoke was too thick, the flames too hot. I tried. God knows I tried, but I couldn't get to them." Eleanor felt tears on her cheeks, though she hadn't realized she was crying. The neighbor said it was an accident, said his men only meant to scare them, that the fire got out of control. The sheriff, he was the neighbor's cousin. Nothing was done. So I did something. I found those men one by one, and when I was done, I couldn't stay in Missouri anymore. "You killed them," Eleanor said softly. "Every last one. And the neighbor too, though I made his death look like a farming accident." Sam looked at her, then his eyes reflecting the firelight. "I'm not proud of it, but I'm not sorry either. That's the kind of man I am, Eleanor, the kind who couldn't save his family, but could sure as hell avenge them." Eleanor was quiet for a moment, then said, "My grandmother used to tell me that revenge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." Smart woman. She was. She also said that sometimes the poison is already in you, and you have to let it out before it kills you. Eleanor shifted to face him. "Is it out now?" Sam considered this. "Most days. Some days, like when I see someone being chased, being hunted, the poison wants to come back. But maybe this time I can use it for something better." "I don't want you to kill for me," Eleanor said firmly. "Then I'll try not to. But I won't let them take you either." Eleanor pulled the leather pouch from her pocket, turning it over in her hands. "You want to know what's really in here?" Sam shook his head. "That's your business." But Eleanor opened it anyway, pulling out a piece of aged deerskin covered in symbols. "It's not just a map, it's a history. Every mark tells a story of my grandmother's people. This one," she pointed to a symbol that looked like a bird, "marks where they held the last green corn ceremony before removal. This one shows where my great-grandmother gave birth while hiding from soldiers. And this," she indicated a sun symbol with rays extending in 4 directions. "This shows where they hid not just gold, but sacred items, things that connect us to the land, to our ancestors. And Branson wants to sell it all. Or the man paying him does. My grandmother heard rumors that someone's been collecting Cherokee artifacts, selling them to museums back east, making fortune off our heritage while we starve on reservations." Sam studied her face in the firelight. "You could take the gold and disappear, start over somewhere they'd never find you." "I could, but then I'd be just another person who ran. My grandmother didn't run. She stayed, preserved our stories, our traditions. She died protecting them." Eleanor carefully folded the map and returned it to the pouch. "I won't dishonor her memory by being a coward." "There's no dishonor in surviving." "No, but there's no honor in it either if survival is all you do." She looked at him pointedly. "You survived your family's death, but what have you done with that survival?" Sam was quiet for a long moment. "Worked, moved metal from one shape to another, existed. That's not living." "No," he agreed. "It's not." A coyote howled in the distance, and Eleanor shivered despite the fire's warmth. Sam noticed and shifted closer, not touching, but offering presence. "Tell me about her," Eleanor said. "Sarah, tell me something that makes you smile instead of grieve." Sam was quiet so long, Eleanor thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "She couldn't cook worth a damn. Burned everything. But she'd get so mad if I tried to help, said she'd figure it out. One time she was so determined to make a pie for my birthday that she stayed up all night practicing. Made 12 pies, each worse than the last. The kitchen looked like a flour bomb had gone off. When I woke up, she was sitting in the middle of the mess, covered in dough and crying. But she'd done it. One perfect apple pie sitting on the windowsill, pretty as a picture. Did it taste good? Terrible. She'd forgotten the sugar. Sam actually chuckled. But I ate every bite and asked for seconds. She knew I was lying, hit me with a dish towel. But she was laughing too. Eleanor smiled. She sounds wonderful. She was. Emma was just like her. Stubborn and fierce and sweet all at once. His voice grew thick. She would have been 5 now. Eleanor did touch him, then just her hand over his on the ground between them. My parents died when I was 7. Fever took them 3 days apart. I remember my mother singing to me, teaching me to braid sweetgrass. My father would carry me on his shoulders through the fields, naming all the plants, showing me which ones healed and which ones hurt. For the longest time, I was angry at them for leaving, like they had a choice. Grief makes us stupid sometimes, and sometimes it makes us strong. My grandmother said grief is just love with nowhere to go, so she taught me to put that love into everything else, into cooking, into healing, into stories. Maybe that's what you're doing with your metalwork, putting love into something that can't leave. Sam turned his hand palm up, letting their fingers intertwine. When did you get so wise? About 5 minutes ago. Before that, I was just a scared girl running barefoot through Texas. They sat like that as the fire burned lower, 2 broken people finding something unbroken in the space between them. Neither spoke of the growing attraction, the way their bodies seemed to lean toward each other like plants toward light. It was too soon, too raw, too complicated with danger literally circling their camp. But when Eleanor finally rose to return to the medical tent, Sam stood too. "Tomorrow, after I teach you to shoot, Would you teach me something? What? One of your grandmother's stories? I'd like to know the history that men are willing to kill for. Eleanor nodded. She would have liked that. She always said stories are meant to be shared, that they die in silence. As she walked away, Sam called out softly, "Eleanor." She turned. "Your grandmother was right about the poison. I've been carrying it so long I forgot what it was like to feel anything else. But tonight felt different." Eleanor smiled, and even in the moonlight, Sam could see the sadness and hope warring in her expression. "My grandmother had a saying, 'New seeds can't grow in old soil until you turn it over.' Maybe that's what we're doing, turning over the soil." She disappeared into the medical tent, leaving Sam alone with the dying fire and the first peace he'd felt in 2 years. Somewhere in the darkness, danger waited. But for now, for these few hours before dawn, there was just the memory of her hand in his, and the possibility that maybe something good could grow from all this pain. The next morning came too soon, bringing with it an unexpected visitor. As Eleanor emerged from the medical tent, she saw a lone rider approaching under a white flag. But this wasn't one of Branson's men. This rider sat tall and proud, wearing the uniform of a Union officer, though the war had been over for a decade. Sam stood ready with his rifle, but lowered it as the rider came closer. His face went pale. "Hello, little brother," the rider said, removing his hat to reveal features startlingly similar to Sam's, though harder marked by different scars. "Frank," Sam breathed. "You're supposed to be dead." Frank Hawthorne dismounted with casual grace, his eyes scanning the camp before settling on Eleanor. Death didn't quite take, though it came close enough at Chattanooga. He touched a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. "Took me 3 years to recover another 2 to find out you'd survived too. Then I heard about Missouri, about Sarah and Emma." Sam's hand tightened on his rifle. "Don't. I'm not here to judge Samuel. God knows I've done worse." Frank's attention returned to Eleanor. "I'm here about her, or rather what she carries." Eleanor stepped forward despite Sam's protective gesture. "You're working with Branson." Frank laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Cole Branson is a rabid dog who needs putting down. No Miss I work for more sophisticated interests. The Union Pacific Railroad, to be specific. They're very interested in ensuring certain historical items end up in the right hands." "You mean stolen and sold," Eleanor said coldly. "I mean preserved and protected," Frank countered. "Do you have any idea how many Cherokee artifacts have been destroyed by farmers plowing fields or thrown away by people who see them as worthless? At least in museums, they'll survive." "In museums, they're dead things behind glass," Eleanor shot back. "My grandmother's stories, her ceremonies, her knowledge, that's what keeps them alive." Frank studied her with interest. "You must be Eleanor Blackwood. Your grandmother was quite famous among certain circles, the last keeper of the Eastern Cherokee traditions. How do you know about her?" "Because I've been tracking Cherokee gold for 2 years, miss." "Not to steal it, but to prevent men like Branson from getting it first." He pulled out a leather journal, weathered and worn. "I have records here of 17 sacred sites that have been looted in the past year alone. The gold always disappears, but the artifacts end up in private collections sold to the highest bidder." Sam stepped between them. "Why should we believe you?" Frank met his brother's eyes. "Because I could have come here with 20 men and taken what I wanted. Because I'm trying to do this the right way, even if it costs me my commission." He paused. "And because I owe you Samuel. I should have been there, in Missouri. You were dead, remember? I was recovering, but I was also a coward. I knew you'd gone home, knew you were trying to build a life. I could have sent word, could have come to help. But I was too busy playing dead, working for men who promised me purpose." Frank's composure cracked slightly. "I found out about Sarah and Emma 6 months after it happened. By then, you'd already disappeared." The brothers stood facing each other, years of pain and missed chances hanging between them. Eleanor watched, recognizing the same grief in both men shaped differently by their choices. "The man who really wants the Cherokee gold," Frank continued, "is Colonel Marcus Whitmore. He owns half the territory's banks and has judges in his pocket. He's been using Branson to do his dirty work, but Cole's gotten greedy, started freelancing. That's why I'm here, to offer an alternative." What kind of alternative? Patrick O'Sullivan had joined them along with Doc Margaret. Frank addressed the group. "The Smithsonian Institution has authorized me to purchase Cherokee artifacts at fair prices with the agreement that tribal representatives will have access to them for cultural purposes. It's not perfect, but it's better than letting them disappear into Whitmore's vault." "And if I refuse?" Eleanor asked. "Then Branson will keep coming. And when he fails, Whitmore will send worse men who won't bother with talks or threats." Frank's expression was grave. "I've seen what they do to people who resist." Sam raised his rifle. "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning from someone who's trying to prevent bloodshed, not cause it." Eleanor felt the weight of the map in her pocket, the responsibility of generations pressing down on her. "I need time to think." Frank nodded. "You have until tomorrow noon. After that, I'll have to report back to Whitmore that negotiations failed. And then—" He didn't finish the sentence. As Frank mounted his horse, he looked back at Sam. "I know you hate me. You have every right to, but I'm trying to make things right the only way I know how." "Making things right would have been being there," Sam said quietly. "This is just you trying to live with yourself." Frank flinched, but didn't argue. He rode away, leaving behind more questions than answers. That afternoon, Sam kept his promise to teach Eleanor to shoot. They walked to a makeshift range the railroad workers had set up for practice. Sam had brought several weapons, a Colt .45, a smaller .38, and a rifle. "The key," he said, standing behind her as she held the .38, "is not to fight the gun. It's going to kick. Accept it, move with it." Eleanor was acutely aware of his presence, his hands gently adjusting her stance, his breath warm on her neck as he guided her aim. "Like this. Perfect. Now squeeze the trigger, don't pull it. Imagine you're pressing straight back." The gun fired the shot going wide of the target. Eleanor jumped at the sound and recoil. "Again," Sam encouraged. "You're thinking too much." "Story of my life," Eleanor muttered, making him chuckle. "Then stop thinking. Feel the weight of the gun, the target in your sight. Everything else is just noise." Eleanor fired again this time, hitting the outer edge of the target. A smile broke across her face. "I hit it." "You did. Now do it again." They practiced for an hour, and by the end, Eleanor could consistently hit the target, though not always the center. As they walked back, she asked, "Do you believe your brother about trying to do the right thing?" Sam was quiet for a moment. Frank was always the idealist. Joined the Union Army because he believed in the cause, while I joined because I was drafted. He wanted to change the world. I just wanted to survive it. And now I think he's a man who's lost his way and is trying to find it again. Whether that makes him trustworthy." Sam shrugged. "I don't know." They paused at the creek that ran behind the camp. Eleanor sat on a large rock, removing her boots to soak her still tender feet in the cool water. Sam joined her, and for a moment they just listened to the water's song. "Your grandmother's story," Sam prompted. "You promised to share one." Eleanor smiled softly. "There's one she told me the night before she died, though I didn't know it would be the last. It's about two wolves." She closed her eyes, remembering. An old Cherokee grandfather was teaching his grandson about life. He said, "A fight is going on inside me between two wolves. One is evil, full of anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, self-pity, guilt, resentment, lies, and ego. The other is good, full of joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, empathy, generosity, truth, and faith. This same fight goes on inside you and inside every other person too." The grandson thought about it for a minute, then asked, "Which wolf wins?" The grandfather replied, "The one you feed." Sam considered this. "Which wolf do you think your brother's feeding?" "I think he's trying to starve the evil one, but it's already so fat from years of feeding that it's not going down without a fight." Eleanor looked at him. "What about you? Which wolf have you been feeding?" "For 2 years, the angry one. Fed it revenge and isolation and whiskey." He picked up a smooth stone, running his thumb over its surface. "But lately I've been thinking maybe it's time to try feeding the other one." "What changed?" Sam looked at her, really looked at her, and Eleanor felt something shift in her chest. "You asked for help, not with words, but with trust. When you took my hand yesterday, you reminded me that sometimes people need saving, and sometimes saving someone else is how you save yourself." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Eleanor found herself leaning toward him, drawn by something stronger than logic or caution. Sam's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "This is probably a terrible idea," Eleanor whispered. "Probably." Sam agreed, but he was leaning in too. The kiss was gentle, tentative, nothing like the passionate embraces in the dime novels Margaret kept hidden in her medical supplies. It was a question and an answer, a promise and a fear, all wrapped in the simple press of lips. When they parted, Eleanor's heart was racing. "I don't know what I'm doing." "Neither do I," Sam admitted. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe knowing what you're doing is overrated." A shout from the camp broke the moment. They looked back to see riders approaching. Not Branson's men, but a larger group, all wearing badges. "The sheriff from Amarillo," Sam said, standing and helping Eleanor to her feet. "Patrick must have gotten word through." As they walked back, Eleanor slipped her hand into Sam's. "Whatever happens next with your brother, with Branson, with all of it, I'm glad you found me yesterday." Sam squeezed her hand. "So am I." But as they reached the camp, Eleanor saw Frank's horse among those at the sheriff's group. Her heart sank. Whatever Frank had told the law, it was about to complicate everything. The sheriff, a weathered man named Thomas Garrett, tipped his hat to Eleanor. "Miss Blackwood, I'm here about the murder of your grandmother. Frank Hawthorne here says you have information about Cole Branson's involvement." Eleanor felt Sam tense beside her. Frank stood with the lawman, his expression unreadable. "He also says," the sheriff continued, "that you're in possession of something Branson will kill to get. Now I can offer you protection, but I need to know what we're dealing with." Eleanor looked at the assembled faces, the sheriff and his men, Frank with his conflicted loyalties, Patrick and the railroad workers ready to defend her, Doc Margaret watching with concern, and Sam, whose hand still held hers, anchoring her to something real and good. "Sheriff," she said, making her decision, "I need to tell you about a map and about a man named Colonel Marcus Whitmore." Frank's eyes widened in surprise. He hadn't expected her to name Whitmore to the law. But Eleanor was done running, done hiding. If she was going to face this, she'd face it completely. "But first," she added, looking at Sam, "I need to know something. When the time comes to choose between the gold and people's lives, which will you choose, Sheriff? Because that choice is coming, and I need to know where everyone stands." The sheriff studied her for a long moment. "Miss, I took an oath to protect the innocent and uphold the law. Gold doesn't matter to dead men. People do." Eleanor nodded. "Then sit down, Sheriff. This is going to take a while." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the railroad camp, Eleanor began to tell her story, not just about the map, but about her grandmother's people, their suffering, their resilience, and the sacred trust that had been passed to her. And as she spoke, she felt the weight of destiny settling around them, all binding them together in what was to come. The sheriff listened to Eleanor's story without interruption, his weathered face growing more grave with each detail. When she finished, he stood and paced the length of the tent, his spurs jangling with each step. "Colonel Whitmore owns half the territorial judges," he finally said. "Going after him directly would be like trying to arrest the wind." "So you won't help?" Eleanor asked, disappointment evident in her voice. "I didn't say that." Sheriff Garrett turned to face them. But we need to be smart about this. Branson, him I can arrest for murder and theft. Whitmore's connection to him, that'll take proof. Frank stepped forward. I can provide that proof. I have correspondence between them, orders for specific artifacts payments made through Whitmore's banks. Sam looked at his brother suspiciously. Why would you betray your employer? Because I discovered what he really does with the artifacts, Frank replied, his jaw tight. He doesn't preserve them. He melts down the gold items, breaks apart the sacred pieces to sell the gems separately. He's destroying history for profit. And you just figured this out. Sam's tone was scathing. I suspected, but I needed proof. Frank pulled out a leather folder. 3 days ago I found it. A warehouse in Dallas full of broken Cherokee artifacts ready for the smelter. The sheriff examined the documents Frank provided, bills of sale, shipping manifest telegrams discussing the acquisition of Indian goods. His expression darkened with each page. This is enough to start an investigation, he said. But Whitmore will know it came from you, Frank. You'll be a marked man. Frank shrugged. I've been dead before. I can handle it. Eleanor stood, suddenly surprising everyone. No. No, the sheriff asked. No more running, no more hiding, no more people getting hurt because of this. She pulled out the map, holding it up. This is what they want, fine. Let them come for it. Eleanor, Sam started, but she cut him off. I have a proposition, she said, addressing the sheriff. We use the map as bait. Draw out both Branson and Whitmore. Catch them in the act of theft and murder conspiracy. That's insane, Doc Margaret protested. You'd be putting yourself directly in harm's way. I've been in harm's way since the moment my grandmother died, Eleanor replied. At least this way it ends, the sheriff considered. It could work, but we'd need to make it believable. Whitmore's too smart to walk into an obvious trap. Then we make it not obvious, Eleanor said. She turned to Frank. You go back to Whitmore. Tell him I'm willing to sell the map, but only to him directly. Say I don't trust intermediaries after what Branson did. He'll suspect a trap, Frank warned. Not if we give him what he expects. Eleanor continued, her mind racing. A desperate woman alone and frightened, willing to trade her heritage for safety and money. You tell him I've fallen for one of the railroad workers. Make me seem weak, emotional, ready to settle down and forget my past. Sam's face darkened. I don't like using our connection as part of this deception. Eleanor met his eyes. It's not a deception if it's true. The words hung in the air. Everyone suddenly found other places to look, giving them a moment of privacy in the crowded space. What are you saying? Sam asked quietly. I'm saying that when this is over, however it ends, I want there to be an us to see what happens next, Eleanor replied. But first, we need to survive it. Patrick O'Sullivan cleared his throat. If we're doing this, we do it right. The railroad camp is defensible, but we need more men. I can deputize volunteers, the sheriff offered, and I've got 6 men with me. I know some Cherokee warriors who'd be very interested in protecting their heritage, Eleanor added. My grandmother had friends among the reservation settlements. Frank nodded slowly. Whitmore will bring at least 20 men. He doesn't take chances. Then we need to even the odds, Sam said, his tactical mind already working. The camp has natural choke points, the canyon entrance, the bridge over the creek. We can control where the confrontation happens. Over the next 2 hours, they planned. The sheriff would return to Amarillo, making a show of giving up the search. Frank would go to Whitmore with Eleanor's offer. The trap would be set for 3 days hence, giving them time to prepare and gather reinforcements. As the meeting broke up, Eleanor found herself alone with Sam by the chuck wagon. The camp cook had left coffee warming, and they each took a cup standing close in the cool night air. You don't have to do this, Sam said. We could get you away tonight. Head to California or Mexico, somewhere they'd never find you. And spend my whole life looking over my shoulder. Eleanor shook her head. That's not living, Sam. That's just prolonged dying. It's better than actual dying. Eleanor set down her coffee and took his hands. My grandmother lived through the Trail of Tears. She lost her parents, her siblings, her home, but she survived and she built a new life, and she passed on our stories. She used to say, "We are still here," like it was a battle cry. Well, I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere. Sam pulled her close, and she rested her head against his chest, hearing his heartbeat steady and strong. "When this is over," he said into her hair, "I want to court you properly, take you to dances, bring you flowers, sit on porch swings, talking about nothing important." Eleanor laughed softly. "That sounds wonderful. Boring, but wonderful." "I want boring," Sam said fiercely. "I want so much boring that we complain about it. I want to wake up every day knowing the most dangerous thing I'll face is whether the coffee's too strong." "Sam." Eleanor pulled back to look at him. "I need you to promise me something. Anything. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen. Promise me," she insisted. "If something happens, you won't go back to feeding the angry wolf. You'll live, really live, not just exist." Sam cupped her face in his hands. "Only if you promise the same." "I promise." He kissed her, then deeper than before, with all the desperation and hope of two people who knew tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. When they parted, both were breathless. "I should tell you," Eleanor said, I've never been with anyone, never even been courted, really." "I know," Sam said gently, "and I don't expect. That's not what this is about." "What is it about then?" Sam thought for a moment. "It's about finding something worth fighting for that isn't revenge or duty or survival. It's about choosing to believe in tomorrow, even when today is trying to kill you." Doc Margaret appeared around the corner. "Sorry to interrupt, but Eleanor, there's something you should see." They followed her to the medical tent where she'd been examining the map under a magnifying glass. "These symbols here," she pointed to a series of marks along the edge. "They're not Cherokee. They're older, possibly Caddo, or even earlier." Eleanor studied them closely. "Grandmother never mentioned these." "Because she might not have known," Margaret said. "This map might be showing more than just where your people hid gold. It might be marking something much older." "What kind of something?" Sam asked. Margaret hesitated. "I've seen similar marks on artifacts that supposedly came from the Spanish expeditions, places they marked as significant. Sacred sites or places of power according to the indigenous people they encountered." Eleanor felt a chill. "You're saying this map might lead to something the Spanish were looking for?" "I'm saying," Margaret replied carefully, "that Colonel Whitmore might be after more than just Cherokee gold. And that makes this even more dangerous than we thought." Frank's voice came from outside. "I need to leave now if I'm going to reach Whitmore by morning. The longer I wait, the more suspicious it'll look." Eleanor walked out to meet him, Sam close behind. Frank had mounted his horse, his face serious in the moonlight. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked him. "I've been running from who I am for years," Frank replied. "Maybe it's time to stop." He looked at Sam. "I know I can't make up for not being there, but maybe I can make sure you don't lose anyone else." Sam stepped forward, reaching up to grasp his brother's hand. "Don't get yourself killed trying to be a hero, Frank. Heroes are just dead men with good stories." "Then I'll try to be a living man with a decent one," Frank replied. He spurred his horse and disappeared into the darkness. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Cherokee warriors arrived from the reservation, led by a man named Joseph Standing Bear, who had known Eleanor's grandmother. Railroad workers fortified positions, cleaned weapons, and practiced formations under Sam's direction. The sheriff's deputies took strategic positions around the camp. Eleanor spent her time with Doc Margaret learning basic medical skills in case they were needed and transcribing her grandmother's stories into a journal. "If something happens to me," she told Margaret, "I want these preserved. The real Cherokee heritage, not what men like Whitmore think is valuable." "Nothing's going to happen to you," Margaret said firmly. "Too many people here won't let it." The night before the confrontation, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She found Sam at his usual spot by the dying fire, but this time she didn't hesitate. She sat directly beside him, taking his hand. "Tomorrow changes everything," she said. "Yes." "Are you afraid?" "Terrified," Sam admitted. "Not of dying, of losing you, of failing again." "You won't fail." "You can't know that." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "I can. Because you're not the same man who lost his family. That man was alone. You're not alone anymore." They sat in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere out there, Frank was leading their enemies into a trap. Somewhere, Colonel Whitmore was counting his expected profits. And somewhere, the spirits of Eleanor's ancestors were watching, waiting to see if their legacy would survive another day. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Eleanor said, "I want you to know that these past days with you have been worth everything. Worth the fear, the pain, the loss. Because I found something I didn't know I was looking for." "What's that home?" she said simply. "Not a place, but a person. You're my home, Sam Hawthorne." He pulled her close, and they stayed that way until dawn, two souls preparing for war, while holding tight to the peace they'd found in each other. Dawn came blood-red over the railroad camp, painting the canyon walls the color of warning. Eleanor stood at the entrance to the main camp, watching the horizon where dust clouds would signal the approach of their enemies. But for now, there was only the morning quiet and the sense of something ending, something beginning. "They'll come from the east," Sam said, joining her. He wore his gun belt and carried his rifle, but his eyes were soft when they found hers. "Frank sent word through the telegraph." Whitmore took the bait. "How many?" 25 men, including Branson's gang. Whitmore himself is coming along with his personal guard. Eleanor nodded her hand instinctively, touching the pouch at her waist. The real map was hidden elsewhere, but she carried a convincing fake, one that would lead to an empty canyon 50 miles north. "The Cherokee warriors are in position," she asked. "Joseph Standing Bear has them spread along the ridge. They'll wait for the signal." Sam paused. "Eleanor, it's not too late to—" "Sam," she interrupted gently. "We've built something here in these few days. Not just you and me, but all of us. A community willing to stand against greed and violence. That's a home worth defending." Before he could respond, Doc Margaret approached with a young woman Eleanor hadn't seen before. She was perhaps 17, with strawberry blonde hair and a determined set to her jaw. "This is Mary Sullivan Patrick's daughter," Margaret explained. "She arrived from Denver yesterday." Mary extended her hand to Eleanor. "Papa's told me about you. Said you're the bravest woman he's met since my mother." "Your father exaggerates," Eleanor replied, but she was touched by the comparison. Patrick's wife had died defending their previous camp from raiders. "I don't think he does," Mary said. "And I want to help. I can shoot, and Margaret's been teaching me medicine." Sam started to protest, but Eleanor raised a hand. "We need everyone we can get. Mary, you'll stay with Margaret in the medical tent. If fighting breaks out, that's where you'll be needed most." As Mary and Margaret left to prepare medical supplies, Sheriff Garrett approached with his deputies. "My men are ready. We've got the legal warrants, though I doubt Whitmore will care about paper when bullets start flying." "He will if he survives," Eleanor said. "Men like Whitmore always care about paper. It's how they justify their crimes to themselves." The morning passed in tense preparation. Eleanor helped the camp cook prepare what might be their last meal together: beans and bacon, cornbread, strong coffee. The railroad workers ate quietly, checking their weapons, exchanging looks that said everything words couldn't. Patrick O'Sullivan stood up, raising his coffee cup. "Lads," he boomed, "and ladies," nodding to Eleanor, Margaret, and Mary, "we've built something good here. We've laid track across wilderness, bridged rivers, moved mountains. Today we defend what matters more than steel and steam. We defend people who've become family." A cheer went up from the assembled workers. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes at the solidarity of these rough men who'd taken her in without question. Joseph Standing Bear approached her after the meal. He was a tall man with silver threading through his black hair, his face marked by years of sun and sorrow. "Your grandmother spoke of you often," he said in Cherokee, which Eleanor understood but rarely spoke. "She said you would be the bridge between worlds." "I don't feel like a bridge," Eleanor replied in English. "I feel like someone caught in the middle." "All bridges are in the middle," Joseph said, switching to English as well. "That's what makes them bridges." He handed her something wrapped in deerskin. "This was your grandmother's. She left it with me years ago, said to give it to you when the time came." Eleanor unwrapped it carefully, gasping at what she found. It was a necklace, ancient and beautiful, with beads of turquoise and shell arranged in a pattern that matched some of the symbols on the map. "It's a prayer made solid," Joseph explained, "for protection, for wisdom, for the strength to do what must be done." Eleanor put it on, feeling the weight of it against her chest, just over her heart. "Thank you." "Your grandmother also said to tell you something," Joseph continued. "She said the treasure isn't the gold. It never was. The treasure is what the gold was meant to protect." Before Eleanor could ask what that meant, a shout went up from the lookout. "Riders approaching." From the east, the camp erupted into controlled chaos. Men took their positions, weapons ready but not visible. Eleanor stood in the open area before the main office, Sam beside her, trying to look like a frightened woman ready to negotiate rather than a woman ready to fight. Frank rode in first, his face grim. Behind him came Colonel Marcus Whitmore, and Eleanor got her first look at the man who'd ordered her grandmother's death. He wasn't what she'd expected. Whitmore was elegant, refined with silver hair and clothes that belonged in a Boston drawing room rather than a Texas railroad camp. He rode like a man who'd learned it as a gentleman's sport, not a necessity. His eyes, when they found Eleanor, were the cold blue of winter ice. "Miss Blackwood," he said, dismounting with practiced grace, "I understand you have something I want." "And I understand you have something I need," Eleanor replied, "money and guarantee of safety." Whitmore smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, though I must say you've caused quite a bit of trouble for such a young woman. Your man Branson caused the trouble when he killed my grandmother." "Ah, yes, unfortunate. Cole can be overzealous." Whitmore gestured, and Branson himself rode forward, his scarred face twisted in a sneer. "Should have just given us the map, girl," Branson said. "Would have saved everyone a lot of pain." Sam's hand moved toward his gun, but Eleanor touched his arm, stopping him. "Not yet. I have the map," Eleanor said, pulling out the fake. "But I want to see the money first, and I want your word that this ends here." Whitmore laughed. "My dear girl, my word is worth more than gold in this territory." He signaled one of his men, who brought forward a leather satchel. $20,000. Enough to go anywhere, be anyone you want." Eleanor took a step forward, then another. She could feel Sam tense beside her, feel the eyes of hidden watchers all around. The moment stretched like a held breath. Then everything happened at once. Branson, impatient and greedy, spurred his horse forward, reaching for the map. Sam's gun cleared leather faster than thought the shot, catching Branson in the shoulder, spinning him from his saddle. Whitmore's men went for their weapons, but the sheriff's voice boomed out, "Nobody move. You're all under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and theft." The deputies emerged from hiding, guns trained on Whitmore's men. For a moment, it seemed the plan might work without bloodshed. Then Whitmore laughed. "Sheriff Garrett, I own the judges who signed your wages. You think your warrants mean anything." He raised his hand, and Eleanor saw the glint of metal from the ridge opposite where the Cherokee warriors waited. "I brought insurance." More men appeared, rifles trained on the camp. Whitmore had brought another 20 men hidden waiting. "Surrender the map," Whitmore said coldly, "or everyone dies." Eleanor felt the world slow down. She saw Sam ready to die, fighting, saw the railroad workers prepared to defend their home, saw Mary's frightened but determined face in the medical tent doorway. And she made a choice. "Wait," she called out. "I'll give you what you want, but not the map." Whitmore's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Eleanor pulled off the necklace Joseph had given her. "The map is nothing without this. It's the key to understanding the symbols, to finding what's really hidden." It was a lie, but a plausible one. Whitmore's greed shone in his eyes. "Both then. The map and the necklace." "Eleanor, no," Sam said quietly. She turned to him, letting him see the truth in her eyes. She had a plan. "Trust me." Eleanor walked forward, the fake map in one hand, the necklace in the other. As she approached Whitmore, she stumbled, dropping both items. As Whitmore bent to retrieve them, she whispered, "The Spanish called it the Cave of Sorrows. Check the back of the map." Whitmore flipped the map over, seeing the additional symbols Margaret had added, copying them from an old Spanish manuscript about failed expeditions. His eyes widened with recognition and greed. "The Cave of Sorrows," he breathed. "The Spanish expedition that disappeared with a fortune in Aztec gold." Eleanor nodded. "My grandmother's people found it, added their own treasure to it. But it's cursed. Everyone who's tried to claim it has died horribly. That's why we hid the map, separated the key." It was all fabrication, but Whitmore was the kind of man who believed in curses when they guarded treasure. He clutched both items, stepping back. "If you're lying," he began. "Then you'll have lost nothing but time," Eleanor said. "But if I'm telling the truth, you'll be the richest man in America." Whitmore studied her for a long moment, then made his decision. "We're leaving," he announced to his men. "We have what we came for." "What about the girl?" Branson asked, clutching his wounded shoulder. "She's nothing now," Whitmore said dismissively. "Let her rot in this camp with her railroad trash." As they prepared to leave, Frank caught Eleanor's eye. He'd played his part perfectly, but she saw the question there. What was she really doing? The answer came when Whitmore's group was a half-mile away. Joseph Standing Bear appeared on the ridge along with his warriors. They didn't attack, just watched as Whitmore's men rode toward the Cave of Sorrows, which was real, but not what Eleanor had implied. It was a box canyon with only one way in or out, the perfect place for the territorial marshals Frank had secretly contacted to be waiting. "You sent them into a trap," Sam said, understanding dawning. "I sent them to justice," Eleanor corrected. "The marshals will be waiting with federal warrants." Whitmore crossed state lines with his crimes. That takes it out of local hands. Sheriff Garrett grinned. "Miss Blackwood, you're either brilliant or the luckiest woman alive." "Maybe both," she said, then swayed on her feet. The tension of the past days caught up with her all at once. Sam caught her, holding her steady. "It's over." "The danger is," Eleanor said, "but I think we're just beginning." That evening, as word came that Whitmore and his men had been arrested by federal marshals, the camp celebrated. The railroad workers brought out hidden bottles of whiskey. Someone produced a fiddle, and soon there was dancing and singing under the stars. Eleanor sat with Sam on the porch of the main office, watching their makeshift family celebrate. Mary was dancing with one of the younger workers, her face bright with joy. Margaret was tending to Branson's wound before the sheriff took him to jail professional, even with a man who'd tried to kill them. Patrick was regaling anyone who'd listen with increasingly elaborate versions of the day's events. "The real map," Sam said quietly. "What will you do with it?" Eleanor pulled out the leather pouch, holding it thoughtfully. "Joseph Standing Bear and I talked. The gold will be used to buy land legally this time. A place where Cherokee families can settle, keep their traditions alive. Not a reservation, but a community." "And you?" Eleanor looked at him. "That depends on whether a certain blacksmith is interested in helping build that community. We'll need tools, plows, horseshoes, all the things that make a settlement work." Sam took her hand. "You're asking me to leave the railroad. I'm asking you to help build something new, something that's ours." Sam was quiet for a moment, then said, I told you I wanted boring. A community of Cherokee and settlers led by a woman who outsmarted the most dangerous man in the territory. That doesn't sound boring." Eleanor laughed. "No, I suppose not." "Sounds perfect, though," Sam continued. He pulled her closer. "Eleanor Blackwood, I know this is too fast, too soon, too everything, but almost losing you today made me realize something. Time isn't guaranteed. We could have years or days. Either way, I want to spend them with you." Sam Hawthorne. Eleanor said, her heart full. "Are you proposing?" "I'm saying that when you're ready, when we've built that community and made it safe, when you've had time to know me without danger and desperation, I'll be asking properly, with a ring and everything." Eleanor kissed him soft and sweet. "And I'll be saying yes." Frank approached them, then looking uncertain. "I'm heading out. The marshals want my testimony against Whitmore." Sam stood facing his brother. "After that, I don't know. Maybe it's time I stopped running from who I am, found something worth building instead of destroying." "The community Eleanor's planning will need protection," Sam said. "Legal protection. Someone who knows the law can file the right papers, make sure no one can take it away." Frank's eyes widened. "You're inviting me." "I'm saying families should stick together," Sam replied. "And it's time we were brothers again, instead of strangers." Frank embraced Sam, then the first time they'd touched with affection in years. When they parted, both men's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'll come back," Frank promised. "After the trial, I'll come back and help build something good." As Frank rode away, Eleanor stood addressing the celebrating crowd. "Friends," she called out, and the music stopped. "We faced down evil today and won. But more than that, we proved that when good people stand together, no force of greed or hatred can defeat us. This camp has become my home. You've become my family. And I promise you, the treasure my grandmother protected won't be hoarded or hidden. It will be used to build a future where all people, Cherokee settlers, anyone seeking an honest life, can thrive together." A cheer went up, and the music resumed. Eleanor and Sam danced, then not well, but with joy, surrounded by their chosen family under the vast Texas stars. The road ahead would be hard, building a community from nothing, bridging two cultures that had been at war. But tonight there was music and laughter and the promise of tomorrow. "No regrets?" Sam asked as they swayed together. "Only one," Eleanor said. "What's that?" "I wish my grandmother could see this, could know that her sacrifice meant something." Sam looked up at the stars. "Maybe she can. Maybe she does." Eleanor followed his gaze, and for a moment she could swear she saw her grandmother's face in the constellation above, smiling proud at peace. The story of Eleanor Blackwood and Sam Hawthorne had begun in violence and loss, but it would continue in hope and love. And that Eleanor thought was the real treasure, not gold hidden in caves, but the chance to build something lasting with someone who saw you whole and chose to stay. 3 months had passed since Whitmore's arrest, and the small settlement of Haven Creek was taking shape 30 miles west of the railroad camp. Eleanor stood on the rise overlooking their new community, watching as Cherokee families and settlers worked side by side raising a barn. The sound of hammers and saws filled the air, punctuated by laughter and voices calling out in both English and Cherokee. "The school frame's almost complete," Sam said, joining her. His hands were covered in sawdust, his shirt soaked with sweat, despite the cool March morning. "Mary Sullivan's already planning lessons for the children." Eleanor smiled, watching Mary directing a group of workers near the school site. The girl had surprised everyone by choosing to stay rather than return to Denver, claiming Haven Creek needed a proper teacher. "Any word from Frank?" Eleanor asked. "Telegraph came this morning. Whitmore got 20 years hard labor. Frank's testimony sealed it." Sam paused. "He's coming next week, bringing legal documents for the land trust." The land trust had been Eleanor's idea, using the Cherokee gold to purchase the land legally, but holding it in trust for the community. No individual owned it. Everyone who contributed labor and commitment earned a stake in its future. Eleanor Joseph Standing Bear called from below, "We have visitors." A wagon approached carrying an elderly white woman and what appeared to be her grandson. Eleanor's heart sank. They'd had several encounters with settlers who objected to their mixed community, some violent enough to require Sheriff Garrett's intervention. But as the wagon drew closer, Eleanor recognized the woman, Mrs. Catherine Walsh, owner of the largest ranch in the county. The widow was legendary for her toughness and her fairness, having run her spread alone since her husband's death 15 years ago. "Mrs. Blackwood," Catherine said, climbing down from the wagon with surprising agility for her 70 years. "Or should I say Mrs. Hawthorne now? Still Blackwood," Eleanor replied, though she and Sam had married in a simple ceremony the previous month. "I'm keeping my grandmother's name for official matters." Catherine nodded approvingly. "Good. Names matter." She gestured to her grandson, a young man of perhaps 20. "This is Matthew. He's got something to tell you." Matthew stepped forward nervously. "Ma'am, I was with Branson's gang, not by choice. They had my sister said they'd kill her if I didn't ride with them." He swallowed hard. "I was there the night they killed your grandmother. I didn't participate, but I didn't stop it either. I've come to apologize and to offer my help." Eleanor felt Sam tense beside her, but she raised a hand for calm. She studied Matthew's face, seeing genuine remorse there. "Your sister," she asked, "safe now? After Branson's arrest, she was freed. She's back home in Missouri." "And you came all this way to apologize," Catherine interjected. "The boy's been torn up about it for months. When I heard what you were building here, I told him he needed to face his guilt like a man." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, then said, "My grandmother believed in redemption. She said every person has two chances, the life they're born into and the life they choose. You've chosen to face what you did. That takes courage." "I want to help build something good," Matthew said, "to balance out the bad I was part of." "Can you work stock?" Sam asked. "Yes, sir. Raised on a farm before everything went wrong." "We need someone to manage the communal herd," Sam said to Eleanor. "The Cherokee families brought cattle, but none of them are ranchers by training." Eleanor nodded. 3-month trial. You work hard 'cause no trouble, and we'll see about making it permanent." Catherine smiled. "Fair enough. Now I've brought something else." She had her grandson unload several crates from the wagon. "Books for your school tools, for your blacksmith shop, and seeds for spring planting. Consider it an investment in good neighbors." "Mrs. Walsh," Eleanor began, but Catherine waved her off. "I've lived here 40 years, seen a lot of communities rise and fall. The ones that last are the ones that bring different people together for common purpose. What you're doing here, it's important, maybe more important than you know." That evening, they held a celebration dinner to welcome the new arrivals. The long tables were set up outside, laden with Cherokee fry bread settler stew, Mexican beans from the railroad workers who joined them, and Irish soda bread that Patrick's daughter Mary had learned to make. Eleanor watched the gathering with a full heart. Cherokee elders sat beside former railroad workers, teaching them words in their language. Children of both cultures played together, their laughter universal. Doc Margaret had set up a permanent clinic and was training 2 Cherokee women in modern medicine while learning their traditional healing in return. "It's working," she said to Sam. "It's actually working." "Early days yet," Sam cautioned, but he was smiling. "Wait until the first bad harvest or the first serious dispute between neighbors." As if summoned by his words, a commotion arose near the corral. 2 men were arguing. One Cherokee, one settler, their voices rising toward violence. "The horse is mine," the settler Tom Bradley shouted. "I bought it fair and square." "With money stolen from my family's farm," the Cherokee man Robert Crow Feather shot back. Eleanor and Sam hurried over Joseph Standing Bear, approaching from the other direction. "What's the problem?" Eleanor asked. Both men started talking at once, accusations flying. Eleanor held up her hand for silence. "One at a time. Tom, you first. I bought this horse from a trader last month. Paid good money for it. Now Robert says it's his." "It is mine," Robert insisted. "Stolen from our farm the same night they burned our corn stores. I know my own horse. See the scar on its flank. My daughter caused that learning to ride." Eleanor examined the horse, seeing the distinctive scar. But she also saw Tom's bill of sale apparently legitimate. "The trader who sold it to you," she asked Tom. "What did he look like?" Tom described a man who matched the description of one of Branson's gang members who'd escaped arrest. "You were both wronged," Eleanor said. "Tom, you bought stolen property without knowing it. Robert, your horse was taken from you illegally. The fault lies with the thief, not each other." "So who gets the horse?" Tom demanded. Eleanor thought for a moment. "Robert, the horse is yours by right. Tom, the community will compensate you for your loss, the same amount you paid. But going forward, we need a better system." She addressed the gathered crowd that had formed. "We need laws. Our own laws agreed upon by everyone, Cherokee and settler alike. And we need a way to enforce them fairly." "A council," Joseph Standing Bear suggested. "Equal numbers from both communities." "And a magistrate," Sam added. "Someone to mediate disputes." "Who?" someone called out. "What about the doc?" another voice suggested. "She's educated fair and don't belong to neither side particularly." Margaret looked surprised but thoughtful. "I'd need legal authority. Real authority recognized by the territory." "Frank can arrange that when he arrives," Eleanor said. "Until then, are we all agreed? A council of 6, 3 Cherokee, 3 settlers, with Doc Margaret as magistrate." A chorus of agreement rose from the crowd. It wasn't unanimous. A few settlers grumbled about taking orders from a woman, and some Cherokee worried about losing their traditional ways of justice. But it was enough. Later that night, as Eleanor and Sam walked back to their small cabin, they encountered Matthew Walsh sitting alone by the river, clearly troubled. "Second thoughts?" Sam asked. Matthew startled, then shook his head. "No, sir, just remembering. The night they killed Mrs. Blackwood's grandmother. I could have done something. Should have." Eleanor sat down beside him. "How old are you, Matthew?" 21, ma'am. "I'm barely older than you. When those men came for my grandmother, I ran. I saved myself and left her to die. We all have our guilts to carry." "But you had no choice." "There's always a choice. I chose to live. You chose to protect your sister. We make the best decisions we can with the circumstances we're given." She stood. "The question isn't whether you failed then. It's what you'll do now." Matthew looked up at her with hope in his eyes. "You really believe in redemption?" "I believe in work," Eleanor said. "Redemption isn't a feeling or a moment. It's getting up every day and choosing to build instead of destroy. It's boring and hard, and most days you won't see any progress. But one day you'll look back and realize you've built something good." Frank arrived the following week with a wagon full of legal documents and surprising news. "The territorial governor wants to meet you," he told Eleanor. "Word spread about Haven Creek, a mixed community that's actually working. That's news." "What does he want?" Sam asked suspiciously. "To make it official. Recognize Haven Creek as a legal township with the right to self-governance." Frank grinned. "Turns out having a successful integrated community makes the territory look progressive to Washington. There's talk of statehood in the next decade." Eleanor felt the weight of that. Official recognition meant protection, but it also meant scrutiny. "There's a condition," Frank continued. "The governor wants to see for himself that it's real and not just propaganda. When, next month, he'll bring reporters, other officials. It'll be a circus." Eleanor looked out at their small community. The half-built buildings, the muddy streets, the mixture of traditional Cherokee dwellings and settler cabins. "We're not ready for that kind of attention." "You have to be," Frank said seriously. This is the chance to protect Haven Creek permanently, to make it impossible for another Whitmore to destroy what you've built. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Buildings were completed at breakneck pace, streets were laid out properly, and everyone worked to present their best face. But tensions arose too. We shouldn't have to pretend to be something we're not, Robert Crowfeather argued at a community meeting. Let them see us as we are. They need to see we're civilized, Tom Bradley countered, that we're not some wild experiment, but a real town. Both, Eleanor said firmly. We show them both. Traditional Cherokee culture alongside modern development. That's what makes Haven Creek special. The night before the governor's arrival, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She found her grandmother's necklace and held it, seeking wisdom from the past. She would be proud, Joseph Standing Bear said, appearing in her doorway. Your grandmother, she dreamed of this. Cherokee and white living as neighbors, learning from each other. Did she, or am I just telling myself that to justify the compromises? Joseph entered, sitting across from her. She was a practical woman. She knew survival sometimes meant adaptation, but she also knew that adaptation without maintaining your core meant death of a different kind. How do we do both? By remembering that the children are watching. Everything we do for them. He gestured toward the window where the new school stood. In there, Cherokee children and settler children learn together. They'll grow up not seeing each other as different, but as neighbors. That's the real victory. The governor arrived the next morning with an entourage that doubled Haven Creek's population. Governor James Morrison was a tall, austere man who looked skeptical from the moment he stepped from his carriage. Eleanor and the council greeted him formally, but she could see him cataloging everything. The mixed groups, the Cherokee dress alongside settler clothing, the unfamiliar combination of architectural styles. Show me your town, Mrs. Blackwood, he said. The tour began at the school where Mary Sullivan had the children sing, first in English, then in Cherokee. The governor's expression softened slightly, watching the mixed group of children perfectly comfortable with both languages. At the clinic, Margaret demonstrated how she combined modern medicine with traditional Cherokee healing, showing lower infection rates than most frontier medical facilities. At the blacksmith shop, Sam worked alongside a Cherokee apprentice, teaching him the trade while learning traditional metalworking techniques in return. It's impressive, the governor admitted as they stood in the town square. But can it last? What happens when drought comes, or disease, or conflict with surrounding communities? The same thing that happens in any town, Eleanor replied. We'll face it together. Together, the governor repeated. A nice word, but I've seen what happens when different peoples try to live together. It usually ends in blood. With respect, Governor Catherine Walsh interjected, having arrived for the occasion. It ends in blood when one group tries to dominate the other. Here, everyone has an equal stake. The governor turned to her. Mrs. Walsh, your endorsement carries weight. You truly believe in this experiment. I believe in results, Catherine said firmly. Haven Creek has had less violence in 3 months than most settlements have in 3 weeks. Their crops are growing and their businesses thriving. Most importantly, their children are growing up without the hatred that poison our generation. That evening, they held a feast. The governor sat between Eleanor and Joseph Standing Bear, watching the entertainment. Cherokee dancers followed by Irish fiddlers, stories told in both languages, children playing games that borrowed from both cultures. Your grandmother, the governor said to Eleanor suddenly. I heard about her death. I'm sorry. She died protecting our heritage. And you're using that heritage to build something new. He was quiet for a moment. My own grandmother was Creek, never talked about it past for white her whole life. But I knew. I saw how she looked at the world differently, saw things others missed. Eleanor understood then. The governor's interest wasn't just political. Haven Creek could be a model, he said quietly, not just for the territory, but for the nation, if you can make it work. We will, Eleanor said with conviction. The governor stood calling for attention. I've seen many settlements in my years of service. I've seen communities built on gold, on cattle, on railways, but I've never seen one built on hope until today. Haven Creek has my full support and official recognition as an incorporated township of the territory. Cheers erupted from the crowd. Eleanor felt Sam's hand find hers squeezing tight. "We did it," he whispered. "We started it," Eleanor corrected. Now comes the hard part, keeping it alive. As the celebration continued around them, a rider approached fast from the east. It was one of the sentries they'd posted, his face grim. "Raiders," he gasped, "coming from the Badlands. At least 30 of them. They'll be here by dawn." The music stopped. The governor's men reached for their weapons. "Comancheros?" Sam asked. "Worse," the sentry replied. "It's Jake Whitmore, the colonel's son. He's come for revenge." Eleanor felt the weight of leadership settle on her shoulders. They'd built something beautiful, but now they had to defend it. She looked around at the faces of her people, Cherokee and settler united in purpose. "Then we'll be ready for him," she said, her voice carrying across the square. "This is our home, and we protect our own." The news of Jake Whitmore's approach spread through Haven Creek like wildfire. Within minutes, the celebration transformed into preparation for siege. Governor Morrison's men offered to help, but Eleanor knew 30 additional defenders might not be enough against raiders hardened by years in the Badlands. "How long until they arrive?" Eleanor asked the sentry. "Dawn may be earlier if they ride through the night." Sam was already organizing defenses. "We need to evacuate the children and elderly to the stronghold." They'd built a fortified shelter in the hillside for emergencies, stocked with supplies and weapons. "No," Eleanor said, surprising everyone. "We evacuate no one." "Eleanor," Sam began, but she cut him off. "If we send away our families, we're telling Jake Whitmore that we expect to lose. We're telling our people that Haven Creek can't protect them." She turned to address the growing crowd. "This is our home. We stand together, all of us." Joseph, standing bare, stepped forward. "The children should at least be secured." "In the school," Eleanor agreed. "It has the thickest walls and sightlines from the bell tower. Mary, can you and the older children handle rifles?" Mary Sullivan nodded firmly. "We've been practicing." Governor Morrison approached Eleanor privately. "Mrs. Blackwood, I can send for federal troops. They could be here in 3 days." "We don't have 3 days, Governor, and even if we did, what message would that send? That we need outsiders to protect us. Haven Creek stands or falls on its own strength." The governor studied her face. "You're gambling everything." "No," Eleanor replied. "I'm believing in what we've built. These people, Cherokee and settler, they've worked side by side for months. Now they'll fight side by side. That's what makes us different from every other town in the territory." Frank approached with Matthew Walsh. "We've been thinking," Frank said. "Jake Whitmore doesn't just want revenge. He wants what his father wanted, the treasure. What if we use that?" "Another fake map won't work twice," Sam pointed out. "Not a fake," Eleanor said slowly, understanding dawning. "The real one, or at least part of the truth." She looked at Joseph. "The sacred items your people hid with the gold, are any of them weapons?" Joseph's eyes widened. "The thunder sticks, ceremonial spears blessed by the war chief before removal. They're said to call lightning from clear skies." "Legends won't stop bullets," Tom Bradley scoffed. "No, but the fear of legends might," Eleanor said. "Jake Whitmore is his father's son, educated, rational, but also greedy and superstitious when it comes to treasure. We can use that." Doc Margaret had been quiet, but now she spoke up. "I've been studying the map's chemical composition. The ink used for some symbols contains minerals that glow under certain conditions. If we could recreate that effect..." "Make him think the treasure is cursed," Sam finished. "Or protected by something he doesn't understand." Eleanor nodded. "We divide our defense, military and mystical. Frank, can you and the governor's men handle conventional fortifications?" "Already started," Frank confirmed. We're building barriers at the 3 main approaches to town. Sam, take our best shooters to defensive positions. Joseph, gather the Cherokee warriors. We're going to give Jake Whitmore a show he'll never forget." Through the night, Haven Creek transformed. Barriers rose from overturned wagons and hastily dug trenches. Cherokee warriors painted themselves for battle, their appearance designed to intimidate. Margaret worked with the Chinese railroad workers who joined them, creating phosphorescent paint that would glow eerily in darkness. Catherine Walsh surprised everyone by arriving with 10 of her best ranch hands. "Neighbors help neighbors," she said simply when Eleanor thanked her. As dawn approached, Eleanor stood in the town square, wearing her grandmother's ceremonial dress, the necklace gleaming at her throat. Around her, Cherokee warriors in full regalia stood alongside settlers in their Sunday best, a deliberate contrast to show they weren't afraid. The first riders appeared on the eastern ridge as the sun painted the sky crimson. Jake Whitmore rode at their head, younger than his father, but with the same cold eyes. His men spread out surrounding the town on 3 sides, leaving only the steep hillside to the west unguarded. Jake rode forward under a white flag, though his hand rested on his pistol. "Eleanor Blackwood," he called, "you killed my father. The law imprisoned your father for his crimes." Eleanor responded, her voice carrying clearly. His death in prison was his own doing. He was murdered, poisoned by Cherokee sympathizers. He was killed by another inmate he'd cheated in a business deal. Governor Morrison interjected, stepping forward. "I have the official report." Jake's face twisted with rage. "I don't care about reports. I want justice, and I want what my father died trying to get. The Cherokee treasure." Eleanor laughed, the sound unexpected and unsettling. "You want the treasure, the cursed gold that's killed everyone who's tried to claim it." "There's no such thing as curses," Jake spat, but Eleanor caught the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Tell that to the Spanish conquistadors who found it first," Eleanor said. "Tell that to the Cherokee warriors who died protecting it. Tell that to your father dead within months of trying to steal it." She pulled out the real map, holding it high. "You want this? Come and take it. But know this, the treasure is protected by more than guns and men. It's protected by the spirits of those who died for it." Jake scoffed, but some of his men shifted uneasily. These were hardened outlaws, but they were also frontiermen who'd heard too many strange tales to completely dismiss the supernatural. "Enough talk," Jake said. "Surrender the map and we leave peacefully. Refuse, and we burn Haven Creek to the ground." "Then you'll burn," Eleanor said simply. She gave a signal, and the Cherokee warriors began chanting, their voices rising in an ancient war song. The sound sent chills down spines, even among Haven Creek's defenders. Then, as planned, smoke bombs created by the Chinese workers exploded around the town's perimeter, creating an ethereal fog. Through the smoke came the warriors, their painted faces and bodies glowing with Margaret's phosphorescent paint. In the dim morning light, they looked like spirits risen from the earth itself. Several of Jake's men pulled back, spooked. "What witchcraft is this?" one shouted. "Stand firm," Jake commanded, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Then the shooting started. Jake's men opened fire, but the smoke and their own fear made their aim wild. Haven Creek's defenders, positioned behind solid cover, returned fire with deadly accuracy. Sam and his marksmen picked off raiders who got too close, while the Cherokee warriors used the smoke as cover to launch guerrilla attacks with both rifles and traditional weapons. In the school bell tower, Mary Sullivan and the older children proved their worth, their elevated position, giving them clear shots at raiders trying to flank the town. But Jake's men had superior numbers, and gradually they pushed forward. The southern barricade fell, and raiders poured through. Hand-to-hand combat erupted in the streets. Eleanor found herself face-to-face with Jake Whitmore himself. He'd fought through to the town square, his face twisted with rage and greed. "Give me the map," he snarled, pointing his gun at her. "You want it." Eleanor pulled the map from her dress. "Then you should know the truth. The gold isn't just hidden, it's been used. Every piece of it spent to buy this land legally. The treasure you're killing for doesn't exist anymore." Jake's face went white. "You're lying." "Check the land records. Every purchase documented, every dollar accounted for. Your father died for nothing, and now you're about to do the same." Jake screamed in rage and pulled the trigger. But Sam had seen the danger. He threw himself at Eleanor, knocking her aside as the bullet whistled past. In the same motion, he drew and fired his shot, catching Jake in the shoulder. The Raider leader fell, clutching his wound. His men, seeing their leader down and facing fiercer resistance than expected, began to waver. Then came an unexpected sound, a bugle call. Federal cavalry appeared on the eastern ridge, called by Governor Morrison despite Eleanor's wishes. The sight of uniformed soldiers was too much for the remaining raiders. They broke and ran, leaving their wounded leader behind. The battle was over, but the cost was evident. Several defenders lay wounded, though miraculously none dead. Buildings bore bullet holes and scorch marks. The dream of Haven Creek had survived, but barely. Eleanor knelt beside Jake Whitmore, who was being tended by Doc Margaret. Despite everything, she felt pity for him. "Your father's greed destroyed him," she said quietly. "Don't let it destroy you too." Jake looked at her with confusion. "Why would you care?" "Because I've seen what revenge does to people. It hollows them out, leaves them with nothing but anger and regret." She stood. "You'll stand trial for this attack. But after that, you'll have a choice. Keep feeding the anger or find something better to live for." As the cavalry rounded up the remaining raiders, Governor Morrison approached Eleanor. "You were right," he said. "Haven Creek defended itself. The cavalry just provided the final push." "No," Eleanor said. "I was wrong. We needed help, and there's no shame in that. Independence doesn't mean isolation. It means choosing your allies wisely. The cleanup took days. Buildings were repaired, wounded, tended stories told and retold. The battle became legend almost immediately, growing with each telling. But for Eleanor, the real victory was smaller and quieter. She stood with Sam watching Cherokee and settler families work together to rebuild a damaged barn. Their children played in the street, unconcerned with the differences that had divided their parents' generation. "We almost lost everything," Sam said, "but we didn't. And now everyone knows Haven Creek won't be pushed around." Eleanor leaned against him. "Your brother fought well." Frank had indeed proven himself, leading the defense of the northern barricade with courage and tactical brilliance. He'd found his redemption not in death, but in protecting life. "He's staying," Sam said. "Says Haven Creek needs a permanent sheriff." Eleanor smiled. "Good. We need people who understand both law and justice." Mary Sullivan approached with a ledger. "The school took some damage, but nothing structural. The children want to know if they can help with repairs." "Of course," Eleanor said. "This is their town, too." As Mary left, Joseph Standing Bear joined them. "The tribal council from the reservation wants to visit. They've heard about our victory about Cherokee and whites fighting together. They want to see if it's real." "What will you tell them?" "The truth. That it's hard, that we don't always agree, that some days the differences seem impossible to bridge." Joseph paused. "But also that it's working. Slowly, painfully, but it's working." That evening, the entire town gathered in the square. Jake Whitmore, his wound treated and his hands bound, was being led to a wagon for transport to federal custody. He stopped in front of Eleanor. "The map," he said. "Was it really used to buy the land?" Eleanor nodded. "Every piece of gold converted to legal tender and used to purchase Haven Creek legally. The treasure my grandmother protected wasn't metal and stones. It was the chance for her people to have a future." Jake was quiet for a moment. "My father would have hated that. Gold used for something as common as land and community. That's why he failed. He saw treasure as something to possess. We see it as something to share." As the wagon carried Jake away, Eleanor felt a chapter closing. The threats would continue. There would always be those who couldn't accept what Haven Creek represented, but they'd proven they could survive. Catherine Walsh approached her weathered face, showing rare emotion. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said. "You've done something most wouldn't dare dream of." "We've started something," Eleanor corrected. "Whether it lasts depends on what comes next." And what does come next? Eleanor looked around at her town, battered but not broken, diverse but united, impossible but real. We live, we build, we show the world that different people can share the same dream. Sam took her hand. Together. Together. Eleanor agreed. The sun set over Haven Creek, painting the sky in shades of hope and promise. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The tribal council visit, rebuilding the constant work of maintaining peace between different peoples. But tonight, they'd earned their rest. Frank approached as the crowd dispersed. "Eleanor, there's something you should know. I've been in contact with newspapers back east. They want to write about Haven Creek, about what you've accomplished here." "Let them come," Eleanor said. "Let them see that it's not perfect, that it's hard work every day. But let them also see that it's possible." As stars emerged in the darkening sky, Eleanor touched her grandmother's necklace and whispered a prayer of thanks. The old woman's sacrifice had led to this, a place where Cherokee and settler children played together, where ancient traditions lived alongside modern progress, where the impossible became everyday reality. The battle for Haven Creek was won, but the battle for its future had just begun. And Eleanor Blackwood Hawthorne, standing with her chosen family in the town built on dreams and determination, was ready for whatever came next. Spring came to Haven Creek with unusual fervor that year, as if the land itself celebrated their survival. The scars from Jake Whitmore's raid were still visible, bullet holes in walls, a burned outline where the southern barricade had stood. But they'd become part of the town's story, reminders of what they'd overcome together. Eleanor stood in the newly expanded schoolhouse, watching Mary Sullivan teach a mixed class of 23 children. The tribal council's visit had resulted in 5 Cherokee families moving from the reservation to Haven Creek, adding their strength to the growing community. "Mrs. Hawthorne," a small voice said. Eleanor looked down to see Emma Crow, Feather Roberts' daughter, holding up a paper. "I wrote about my grandmother like you asked." Eleanor read the child's careful script, telling the story of her grandmother's journey on the Trail of Tears. It was simple but powerful, a child's perspective on an enormous tragedy. "This is beautiful, Emma. Would you like to read it at the Founders' Day celebration?" The girl's eyes widened. "In front of everyone. Your story is part of Haven Creek's story. It deserves to be heard." As Emma ran back to her seat, Eleanor noticed Sam entering the schoolhouse, his face troubled. "What is it?" she asked, joining him outside. "Riders coming. Not raiders. They're flying territorial flags." But Frank recognized one of them. "It's James Harriman." Eleanor's blood chilled. Harriman was the territorial superintendent of Indian Affairs, known for his harsh policies and belief that integration was impossible. "He's coming for the Cherokee families," she said. "Most likely. The reservation system doesn't allow for what we're doing here." Eleanor straightened her spine. "Then we'll have to convince him otherwise." Harriman arrived with an escort of 6 soldiers, his thin face pinched with disapproval as he surveyed the town. He dismounted in front of the council hall, where Eleanor and the full council, 3 Cherokee, 3 settlers, waited. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said deliberately, using her maiden name, "I'm here about the illegal movement of Cherokee families from the reservation." "They moved here legally," Frank interjected, stepping forward with documents. "I filed all the proper paperwork." Harriman barely glanced at the papers. "The paperwork may be in order, but the situation is not. Indians and whites living together as equals. It's unnatural and dangerous." "Dangerous to whom?" Joseph Standing Bear asked calmly. "To everyone. History shows what happens when races mix inappropriately. Violence, degradation, the loss of what makes each people distinct. What we've lost, Eleanor said, is the hatred that keeps people apart. What we've gained is understanding. Harriman's laugh was cold. Understanding you're living in a fantasy. When resources grow scarce, when disease comes, when children grow up confused about their identity, then you'll see the truth. The truth, Catherine Walsh said, having arrived for the confrontation, is that Haven Creek has lower crime, better crop yields, and healthier children than any other settlement in the territory. For now, Harriman countered, but I have the authority to return these Cherokee to the reservation where they belong. Over my dead body, Sam said quietly, his hand moving to his gun. The soldiers tensed, but Eleanor raised a hand for calm. Mr. Harriman, before you make any decisions, spend 3 days with us. See how we actually live. If after that you still believe we're a danger, we'll present our case to the territorial governor. Harriman considered. 3 days. But I warn you, Mrs. Blackwood, I've seen many experiments in racial harmony. They all end the same way. Over the next 3 days, Eleanor orchestrated a careful campaign to change Harriman's mind. But she didn't show him a performance. She showed him reality. He saw Cherokee and white children playing together, but also fighting and making up the way all children do. He saw Joseph Standing Bear and Tom Bradley argue fiercely about irrigation rights, then work side by side to solve the problem. He saw Doc Margaret treating a Cherokee elder with traditional remedies, learned from the tribe, saving a life that modern medicine alone couldn't have preserved. On the second evening, Harriman attended a town meeting where a serious dispute arose. A settler's cow had destroyed a Cherokee family's garden. The argument grew heated, with accusations flying about carelessness and deliberate sabotage. Eleanor let it play out, watching Harriman watch them. The council deliberated publicly, disagreeing, compromising, finally reaching a solution both families could accept. It wasn't perfect. No one was completely happy, but it was fair. That's what you wanted me to see, Harriman said to Eleanor afterward. Not that you don't have conflicts, but that you resolve them without violence. Without violence based on race, Eleanor corrected. We have the same conflicts any town has, but we don't let them become about Cherokee versus white. They're about individuals solved by community. On the third day, something unexpected happened. A tornado touched down 5 miles east, devastating a neighboring settlement, Millbrook, an all-white town that had refused to trade with Haven Creek. Without hesitation, Haven Creek mobilized. Cherokee and settlers loaded wagons with supplies, medical equipment, and building materials. Eleanor led a group of 30 volunteers to help, despite knowing Millbrook's hostility toward them. Harriman accompanied them, watching as Haven Creek's people worked tirelessly to rescue survivors, treat wounded, and shelter the homeless. He saw the Millbrook residents' initial suspicion transform into gratitude as Cherokee healers saved children as settler and native worked together to raise temporary shelters. They hated you, Harriman said to Eleanor as they returned. Yet you helped them. They're neighbors, Eleanor replied simply, and neighbors help neighbors whether they like each other or not. That evening, Harriman called a meeting. The entire town gathered, tension thick in the air. I came here, he began, believing Haven Creek was a dangerous experiment doomed to fail. I've seen forced integration destroy communities, create resentment that lasted generations. He paused. But this isn't forced. Every person here chose to be here, chose to build something together. He pulled out an official document. I'm recommending to the territorial government that Haven Creek be designated a special administrative zone exempt from standard reservation policies. The Cherokee families here will be considered legal residents, not subject to forced return. Cheers erupted, but Harriman raised his hand for silence. However, this exemption depends on Haven Creek maintaining its current stability. Any significant racial violence, any breakdown of your system, and the exemption will be revoked. We understand, Eleanor said, "Thank you." Harriman prepared to leave, then turned back. "Mrs. Blackwood, I've spent my career believing separation was the only way to prevent bloodshed between races. You've shown me another possibility. I am not entirely convinced it will work long term, but I hope it does." As Harriman's convoy departed, Frank approached Eleanor with a telegram. "It's from Jake Whitmore." Eleanor tensed, but Frank smiled. "He's in federal prison, but he's been cooperating with authorities. He's provided evidence about other groups planning to raid integrated settlements. He says he wants to make amends." "People can change," Eleanor said, remembering her own words to Jake. "Sometimes they just need someone to believe they can." That night, Haven Creek celebrated. The battle for their right to exist as an integrated community had been won, at least for now. But Eleanor knew the real work was just beginning. She found Sam by their cabin, working on something in the fading light. As she approached, she saw it was a cradle beautifully carved with both Cherokee and Celtic designs. "Sam," she asked, her heart racing. He looked up, saw her expression, and smiled. "Doc Margaret told me. Said you wanted to be the one to share the news, but I couldn't help starting this." Eleanor placed her hand on her still flat stomach. "A baby. Our baby." "Growing up in Haven Creek," Sam said, pulling her close, "never wondering if Cherokee and settlers can live together because they'll see it every day." "The next generation," Eleanor murmured. "The ones who'll make this normal instead of extraordinary." Frank joined them, carrying his own news. "The Eastern newspapers want to do a series on Haven Creek. Harper's Weekly, The Atlantic, even international papers. We're becoming famous." "Fame brings problems," Sam warned. "And opportunities," Eleanor countered. "Other communities struggling with integration could learn from us. We could help spread what we've learned." Over the following weeks, Haven Creek settled into a new rhythm. The fame did bring challenges. Tourists wanting to gawk journalists, asking intrusive questions, politicians wanting to use them as examples for their own agendas. But it also brought unexpected allies. A Jewish merchant family fleeing persecution in Eastern Europe asked to settle in Haven Creek. A group of Mexican vaqueros displaced by border conflicts inquired about bringing their cattle expertise to the community. Former slaves from the Deep South seeking a place where their children could get real education wrote letters of interest. "We're becoming more than Cherokee and white," Joseph Standing Bear observed at a council meeting. "We're becoming American. The real American where all peoples can find home." Eleanor stood her pregnancy now showing. "Then we need to expand our council. Every group that joins us should have representation, not just token presence, but real voice in decisions." "That could get complicated," Tom Bradley pointed out. "Too many voices, nothing gets done." "Democracy is complicated," Frank said. "That's what makes it strong." The vote to expand was unanimous, though not without reservation. Change was hard, even for a community built on change. Matthew Walsh, who'd become the community's most successful rancher, suggested something else. "We need our own newspaper, tell our own story instead of letting outsiders define us." Mary Sullivan volunteered to run it. "I can teach and edit. The older students can help with printing." And so the Haven Creek Herald was born, its first issue featuring Emma Crow, Feather's story about her grandmother, alongside Matthew's account of redemption and second chances. One evening, as summer turned toward autumn, Eleanor sat with her grandmother's journal, reading the old stories to her unborn child. Sam worked nearby. Frank discussed legal matters with Joseph, and the sounds of the community drifted through their windows. Children playing, adults working, life continuing. "Your great-grandmother was a keeper of stories," Eleanor whispered to her belly. "She preserved them through removal, through loss, through everything that tried to silence them. Now those stories live here not just in memory, but in reality." Cherokee and settler, former slave and immigrant, all building something together. The baby kicked, and Eleanor smiled. You'll grow up thinking this is normal. That's the real victory. Not that we survived the raids or convinced the government, but that children like you will never know a world where people can't live together. Sam set aside his work and joined her, his hand covering hers on her stomach. What do you think your grandmother would say about all this? Eleanor considered. I think she'd say we're not done, that every generation has to choose whether to build walls or bridges. But I also think she'd be proud that we chose bridges. As the sun set over Haven Creek, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, the town settled into evening routines. Cherokee drums echoed from the eastern quarter, Irish fiddles from the west, and somewhere in between, children's voices singing songs that borrowed from both. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was real, it was working, and it was theirs. Haven Creek had been reborn from violence into hope, from division into community. And in Eleanor's womb, the next generation grew, carrying the promise that what seemed impossible to their parents would be simply life to them. The treasure Eleanor's grandmother had protected had transformed from gold into something infinitely more valuable, a place where all people could belong, where different cultures strengthened rather than threatened each other, where the American dream wasn't just for one kind of American, but for all. October arrived with golden light and the promise of harvest. Haven Creek bustled with preparation for their first official Founders' Day celebration, a festival that would commemorate not just the town's founding, but its survival and growth into something unprecedented in the American frontier. Eleanor, now heavy with child, stood in the town square watching the preparations. Booths were being erected, showcasing Cherokee crafts alongside settler goods, Mexican food next to Irish stew, the fusion that had become Haven Creek's signature. You should be resting, Doc Margaret scolded, approaching with her medical bag. I'll rest when the baby comes, Eleanor replied, though she did accept the chair Sam brought her. This is too important to miss. The celebration would mark more than just survival. 3 days prior, they'd received word that President Hayes himself had signed legislation recognizing Haven Creek as a model community for integration, providing federal protection and funding for expansion. The newspaper delegation arrives today. Frank announced joining them. Harper's Atlantic Monthly, even a photographer from New York. Let them see us as we are, Eleanor said. Not perfect, just possible. As if to underscore her point, an argument broke out between two vendors about booth placement. The council mediator, a new position they'd created, stepped in, and within minutes, a compromise was reached. It was mundane, ordinary, and exactly what made Haven Creek extraordinary. Sarah Walking Cloud, one of the newest Cherokee residents, approached Eleanor with a bundle. For the baby, she said, revealing a blanket woven with both Cherokee patterns and Irish cable designs. Mary Sullivan and I made it together. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. It's beautiful, a perfect symbol of what we're building here. The journalists arrived at midday, their Eastern clothes and manners marking them as outsiders. Eleanor assigned Emma Crow, Feather, and Thomas Bradley Jr., both 12 years old and best friends despite their father's initial animosity, to give them a tour. Why children as guides? One journalist asked. Because they'll tell you the truth, Eleanor replied. Adults explain and justify. Children just show you their life. As evening approached, the entire population of Haven Creek, now nearly 300 souls, gathered in the square. The stage they'd built held representatives from every group in the community. Governor Morrison had returned for the occasion, and he called for silence. Ladies and gentlemen, what we celebrate today should be impossible. History tells us different peoples cannot live as equals. Haven Creek proves history wrong. Eleanor was helped onto the stage, her pregnant form commanding attention. She looked out at the sea of faces, Cherokee and white Mexican and Irish former slaves and European immigrants, all calling Haven Creek home. My grandmother, she began, her voice carrying clearly, died protecting a treasure, but the treasure wasn't gold. It was hope. Hope that someday her people and the people who'd taken their land could find a way to live together. Not through conquest or submission, but through choosing to see each other as human. She paused, her hand on her belly. This child I carry will be born into a world where Cherokee and Irish ancestry aren't at war in their blood, but united, where their playmates speak 3 languages before breakfast and think nothing strange about it, where the color of skin matters less than the content of character. That's naive. Someone called from the crowd, a visitor, not a resident. Eleanor smiled. Perhaps, but we've been called naive since we started. Naive when we invited Cherokee families to leave the reservation. Naive when we accepted former slaves as equals. Naive when we let women vote in our council elections before the territory granted suffrage. And yet, here we stand. Sam joined her on stage, his presence solid and reassuring. Haven Creek isn't perfect. We argue, we disagree, sometimes we fail, but we get up the next day and try again. Because the alternative, separation, hatred, fear, we've seen where that leads. Joseph Standing Bear spoke next, his voice carrying the weight of generations. My people were forced from their homes, driven like cattle across the country. Many thought we would disappear, become nothing but a memory. But we survived. And now, in Haven Creek, we do more than survive. We thrive not by abandoning who we are, but by sharing it. Young Emma Crow Feather read her grandmother's story, her clear voice bringing tears to many eyes. Matthew Walsh spoke of redemption and second chances. Mary Sullivan shared her vision for education that honored all traditions while preparing children for a modern world. As night fell, the celebration began in earnest. Cherokee drums and Irish fiddles found a shared rhythm. Mexican guitarists taught German immigrants their songs. Children of all backgrounds played games that borrowed from every culture present. The Eastern journalists were visibly moved. One approached Eleanor. This seems almost too good to be true. What aren't you showing us? Eleanor laughed, then winced, her hand going to her belly. We're not showing you the manure that needs mucking the crops that fail the nights when old prejudices surface and harsh words are spoken. We're not showing you the 100 daily compromises, the exhaustion of always building bridges, but those aren't secrets. They're just life. She winced again, and Doc Margaret was immediately at her side. The baby, I think. Yes. The celebration paused as Eleanor was helped to the medical building, but she turned back to the crowd. Don't stop celebrating. This child chooses their moment well, born on the day we celebrate becoming truly American. The labor was long but uncomplicated. As dawn broke on the second day of the festival, Eleanor and Sam's daughter entered the world, a child of 2 heritages born into a community that saw that as strength, not division. What will you name her? Margaret asked as she placed the baby in Eleanor's arms. Eleanor looked at Sam and they spoke together. Hope, Hope Walking Hawk Hawthorne. The name honored both traditions, the English virtue name, the Cherokee naming pattern, the Irish surname. It was complicated and beautiful, like Haven Creek itself. Frank entered with news. The journalists want to know if they can report the birth, a symbol of Haven Creek's future, they're calling it. Let them, Eleanor said, exhausted but radiant. But make sure they report the whole truth, that she's not special because of her mixed heritage. She's special because she'll grow up where that mixing is normal. As the festival continued outside, the people of Haven Creek came by in small groups to meet the newest resident. Cherokee elders blessed her in their tradition. Irish grandmothers whispered old country prayers. Mexican women brought protective charms. Catherine Walsh, now in her 70s, but still sharp, held the baby with surprising gentleness. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she told Eleanor. "You've done something most wouldn't dare dream." "We've all done it," Eleanor corrected. "Every person who chose to stay, to build, to try." The Eastern newspapers would run their stories spreading word of Haven Creek across the nation. Other communities would try to replicate what they'd done with varying success. Some would fail, torn apart by prejudices too deep to overcome, but some would succeed, adding their own innovations to the model Haven Creek had created. Years later, historians would mark Haven Creek as a turning point, not the end of racial division in America, but proof that ending it was possible. They would study how a grieving young woman and a broken cowboy had built something from nothing but determination and hope. But on that October morning in 1875, as baby Hope slept in her parents' arms while celebration continued outside, Haven Creek was simply home. A place where impossible had become everyday, where different had become normal, where the American dream had evolved into something more beautiful and complex than its founders could have imagined. Eleanor looked out of the window at her town, their town, and whispered to her daughter, "You're inheriting a world we built from scratch, little one. It won't be easy to maintain. Each generation will have to choose to keep building bridges instead of walls. But we've proved it can be done." Sam added his own whisper, "And you'll prove it can last." The sun rose, fully bathing Haven Creek in golden light. Children played in the streets, their games a mixture of cultures. Adults worked side by side, their differences forgotten in shared purpose. And in the medical building, a baby born of two worlds slept peacefully, the living symbol of a future where those worlds were one. The story of Haven Creek had begun with tragedy. An old woman's death, a young woman's flight, a cowboy's rescue. But it ended with triumph. Not the triumph of conquest or domination, but of cooperation and community. Eleanor's grandmother had died protecting a treasure. Her granddaughter had used that treasure to build something priceless, a place where all people could belong, where diversity was strength, where the impossible became possible through the simple act of choosing to see each other as human. And that more than gold or land or legend was the true treasure of Haven Creek, proof that America's promise could extend to all its people if they were brave enough to claim it together.